all the stakeholders, the government, the establishment included, the judiciary, the bureaucrats, the private sector need to sit down and they need to sign a charter of economy where you could see a 10-year policy being made in Pakistan. We saw the likes of China, when you saw China lifting 800 million people out of poverty from 1990 to 2000. So you saw a big opening up of China. That was because of a 10-year stable policy which all the stakeholders sat down and there was no compromise on the economic policy. So Pakistan needs to take that route. It needs to sit down all of its stakeholders and they need to decide a 10-year policy.
So tell us about Zarya and what pushed you towards creating an e-commerce platform for the commodities.
So Zarya is basically the Amazon of commodities. You could think of it as the Amazon for commodities. The idea behind Zarya was, so Pakistan's commodities, size of commodities towards the GDP is roughly 60 to 70 billion dollars. So, and it still relies on traditional and archaic methods for supply chain and distribution. So the idea behind Zarya was to actually revamp this and revolutionize this through cutting edge technology, as we've seen in the South Asian market. In the likes of India, if you could talk about off business, it's a $7 billion company now, is revolutionizing the commodity space. You could talk about Bangladesh, you could talk about LATAM, you could see Tool. It is another unicorn which has been disrupting the commodities marketplace. So to make it easy, what Zarya does is, so all of the commodities which are being traded into Pakistan, that's all being done physically. And there's a lot of information asymmetry given the prices of commodities, given the quality of commodities, given the trade of these commodities. And there's a big black market economy side to the trade of commodities as well. So those are some of the big challenges. For example, if we talk about cotton in Pakistan, so there's a big import of cotton coming into Pakistan. So why is that happening? That is happening because of better quality of imported cotton, but also there's lack of transparency on the local cotton prices. There's no hedging which can be done by these spinning mills, these buyers of cotton. So they can't hedge their cotton prices. They don't know what the future prices of cotton will be like. You will see similar challenges in, let's say, flour mills. So flour mills want to buy wheat at an early stage before the harvesting is done. They want to book wheat for the entire season. They cannot trade future prices. So there's no digital trade being happening. And there's no future markets developed for commodities in Pakistan at the moment. What Zarya is trying to do is, it aims to develop in the future a futures market for these commodities, where you could firstly monitor the real-time prices of these commodities. So we have about 10 commodities listed on the Zarya platform right now, which range from agri-commodities, construction commodities, and other sorts of fertilizer commodities as well. So you could monitor the actual real-time prices of these commodities on our app. So that is one big benefit which Zarya is providing, which was not done before. Secondly, logistics. So logistics is a big challenge. You need quicker turnaround, you need quicker throughput. So Zarya actually cuts down the delivery timing from about 72 hours on average in the industry to 24 hours in the industry. Thirdly, financing. So as I mentioned before, the banks are completely hesitant to provide any sorts of financing to these SMEs, to the retailers, to the private sector in general. So that's where Zarya steps in. So Zarya will enable credit to be provided based on our due diligence to these SMEs. So enabling faster and more efficient trade for these SMEs in Pakistan. Fourthly, price discrimination. So let's suppose we talk about wheat. So with wheat, you have a lot of hoarding being done in the market. The government sets another rate. For the off sector, off formal market, there's another rate. There's a lot of price discrimination. So where does the buyer actually know what the true price of the commodity is? On Zarya, you will only find the true prices of the commodities, and we guarantee that the prices are going to be a minimum of 5% cheaper of market prices. That's one thing. Quality. So we only work with trusted suppliers, and they're verified on our platform. So quality assurance is one big thing which Zarya promises, and that is the reason that a lot of buyers now depend upon Zarya for its trade of commodities. So I think overall in general, this, as I mentioned, there's an $80 billion market opportunity which still relies on traditional and archaic methods to do trade. So Zarya is trying to make it more efficient. It's trying to digitalize their entire supply chain, end-to-end disruption. It's trying to make better logistics. It's trying to enable finance to these SMEs and retailers, which was not being done in Pakistan before. So it's giving access to those SMEs. For example, you're a cement distributor, and on a monthly basis, if you were before listing 500 tons of cement on a monthly basis, Zarya will enable you to bring that up to 1,000 tons by providing you faster delivery, faster turnaround, access to credit. And so these are some of the things Zarya is working on to increase the size of the pie. So that is, I think, what needs to be done in Pakistan right now, and that is the market we plan to disrupt.
Amazing. But when we look at the Pakistani economy with heightened inflation of 23.1%, you have high interest rates at a record 22%, and political volatility at, some would argue, an all-time high. The cement industry is suffering as well. So how have you seen that impact your other business, Flying Cement?
Right. So if we talk about the cement industry, right now in Pakistan, you have a production capacity of roughly 90 million tons. In 2017 and 18, the utilized capacity was roughly 65 to 70%. So on an annual basis, the sales volume was roughly 55 to 60 million tons. Right now in 2023, last year it dropped to about 45 to 50 million tons. So it's actually declined. If you look in quantity and the volume size of things, it's actually declined over the past 4 or 5 years. So the cement industry is obviously struggling in terms of volume. But the price has obviously shot up since 2017, 2023. That's because of higher increase in input prices such as coal, such as other raw materials as electricity. Back in 2018, the electricity price was roughly 10 rupees a unit. Right now, that's 45 rupees plus. So obviously the industry is struggling, and there needs to be some measures taken by the government. For example, trade with India. That's one thing I think the government should focus on renewing its ties with India and opening the borders again with India. Because in 2016 to 17, the trade with India, I think it was roughly about $300 to $400 million. And today it has a potential to reach about $20 to $30 billion on an annual basis. It's our biggest neighbor right now. And we need to start trading with India. If you talk about cement, cement has a potential to export about 10 to 15 million tons of cement on an annual basis to India. So I think that is something we need to focus on. We need to open up regional markets. I think DG Khan Cement has recently started exporting clinker to US. That's a good sign for the industry. I think so we need to tap in regional markets, and the government needs to come in and it needs to help us provide us those policies and that level playing field so we could compete with other regional players as well.
Could you expand on the policies that you expect from the government to aid your business?
So right now, firstly, the government and the state bank need to develop a policy so the banks could still continue lending to the cement industry. Right now, lending has come to a halt. Banks are completely putting all their allocation towards the T-bills and government treasury bills. So the private sector borrowing has completely declined by about I think 60 to 70% if you look at the last 3-4 years. If you look at restructuring, if you look at defaults, they've shot up. So, but banks are not facilitating the private sector at all right now. They're not financing any new cement plants. They're not providing any new working capital facilities. So financing is one area where State Bank needs to provide such policies towards the bank so they could start borrowing, the private sector could start borrowing up again. That's one area. The second area is cement is right now one of the highly most taxed industries in Pakistan right now. If you talk about federal excise duty, that's roughly 3,000 rupees a ton. If you talk about sales tax, that's 18%. So it's one of the highest tax industries. That's fine. But as long as the sales tax refunds are also timely processed, the income tax refunds are timely processed, so the internal cash generation of the company is not suffered. Then the export-oriented policies should be developed. So with that, trading partners, Pakistan should be given an edge. So there should be no duty imposed upon Pakistani exports towards other countries. So for example, even China is a big target market for us. India, as I mentioned, so trade should again be revitalized with India. Afghanistan is a big market, so there's a lot of anti-dumping happening of cement of South African players in the regional markets. So Pakistan cement is not competitive at the moment. So with our trade partners, such duty tariffs should be developed so Pakistan's cement is attractive in other regional markets as well.
But a lot of startups in recent years have gone belly up. Their unit price of economics is just not making sense for them. What do you think the government can do to aid them?
Firstly, given my personal opinion, I think the VC rush which came into Pakistan in about 2020 to 2021, we saw a big boom. We saw about $400 million in funding which came, and then you saw a lot of startups going bust. Why did that happen? I personally think because the KPIs which were set by these VCs were not realistic. They just wanted to grow their top line, their sales figures, without actually thinking if those sales are sustainable. Because those sales were being done at a loss of about 6 to 7% margins. If you talk about the likes of Airlift, we saw that happening. We saw a lot of startups going under despite them having raised millions of dollars. And that has not been good for the industry overall, because now foreign investors are quite wary of investing in Pakistan. So I think, I think the KPIs need to be very realistic. They need to be sustainable. So there's not a lot of burn, and the sales, you cannot push into a market where there's actually no room. There's no room for another startup to be in. So there needs to be some innovation. There needs to be some disruption in these ideas which shall happen. And again, there should be hand-holding of the government in terms of policies, in terms of attracting that foreign investment. So, for example, setting up your holding companies, giving tax benefits to the VCs which invest in Pakistan, giving them some sort of protection that their money is going to be safe, because we saw in the likes of TAG, this digital bank which went under, then you had a criminal case being registered against them. So obviously these things don't give, it's very discomforting for the foreign investors. And I think for the founders as well, they need to be very realistic, and they need to be very straight up. Anyone can make pretty slides and good numbers on an Excel. But when it comes to operations, when it comes to actually making those ground impact, creating an impact on the ground, that's where the founders really need to focus on, and creating value out of something. And that is where I think in the next few years, Zarya will play a very pivotal role. So Zarya has never, its gross margin has been positive from start till date. We've never made a sale on a loss. So our contribution margins and our unit economics has been positive from day one. So I think that's where founders need to focus on. They need to build a sustainable business model, so such that our startup industry can thrive again, and you could see an influx of foreign investors, as we saw with the likes of India and Bangladesh.
Definitely. If you talk about foreign venture capitals, they've had interest in Pakistan over the last 10 years. That's declined. But right now, there's a lot of conversation going around local currency VCs. So what do you think about the emergence of local currency VCs? There's some out of Islamabad at the moment. They're export oriented. Do you think this might be the future of VCs in Pakistan instead of attracting foreign investment?
I think that's a big area of development. So I would like to see that in the context of our stock exchange as well, because you have a lot of family offices in Pakistan, and which are hesitant to invest in the stock market, despite a stock market right now has a PE of 4 to 4.5x compared to regional markets. It's still quite underpriced. So a lot of family offices, a lot of business groups in Pakistan, they're still hesitant to invest in the Pakistan Stock Exchange. So obviously it would be a bigger challenge getting them to invest into risky startups from which are at an early stage right now, which are only in an ideation phase right now. So it would be risky to attract them. But at the same time, I think setting benchmarks such as getting the fund in PKR, and those are more realistic things which you need to work on. And right now you saw one of the VC, I think it's Sai Capital, they recently started a PKR denominated fund. I think those are steps in the right direction. And there's a lot of gunpowder sitting on the sidelines right now. There's a lot of money which is being invested into real estate right now, and that is just creating a bubble. And so that's an unproductive sector. So that money could be directed towards the startup industry if the right policies are given. There's a lot of money sitting on gold right now. There's a lot of money just sitting on in the banks on cash deposits. When you're getting 21% on the bank, why would any family office or any individual want to invest in a risky startup? So those are some challenges right now which are being faced by the industry in general. However, I think given the right policies, and with interest rates coming down slowly, I think you could see an influx of local investment pushing through these startups.
And I just wanted to shed some light on the energy sector right now. You've spoken about how coal prices increase have affected the cement business, but you operate in Punjab. So how is it operating in Punjab? How is it different than conducting industrial work in Sindh? What's been your experience regarding that?
Right. So I think Pakistan, as we know, has one of the largest coal reserves in the world. Back in 2017, when Flying Cement made its pivot from imported coal to local coal, we faced a lot of challenges. And we were one of the first players which actually entered the local coal market, starting purchasing coal from Balochistan and using local coal and refining it. And at the time, it was very challenging for us, and no other player was willing to make that pivot towards local coal. So we initiated that step. And if you look in terms of quality, you have one of the finest qualities in terms of, when you talk about coal, you talk about the gross calorific value. In Balochistan, that's north of 6,500. So it is on par with your imported coal. Obviously, the sulfur and the moisture contents, those are slightly higher compared to your imported coal, but still it's workable. And with the energy sector, I think Pakistan will need to make a big bet on coal. Despite those climate concerns and other concerns, India still made a big bet. If you look at Adani just purchased a big coal mine in Australia. It generates about 5,000 megawatts through coal. And Pakistan has the cheapest source of energy right now. With Thar coal, you could generate electricity at lower than 10 rupees a unit. Whereas if you use imported coal, if we talk about imported fuel, those costs could go up to 35 rupees a unit. So there's a big difference which needs to be capitalized on. So Pakistan needs to shift its energy dependence on local coal and eventually phase it out over the next 15-20 years, as we saw the UK doing it, as we saw the European countries doing it. But Pakistan needs to make that shift, and it needs to make it as soon as possible.
Pakistan's struggling a lot when it comes to its current account deficit. Your work shifting to local energy resources is intrinsic in helping that. What else do you think the government can do to facilitate a better current account status?
Firstly, I think all the stakeholders, the government, the establishment included, the judiciary, the bureaucrats, the private sector need to sit down and they need to sign a charter of economy where you could see a 10-year policy being made in Pakistan. We saw the likes of China, when you saw China lifting 800 million people out of poverty from 1990 to 2000. So you saw a big opening up of China. That was because of a 10-year stable policy which all the stakeholders sat down and there was no compromise on the economic policies. So Pakistan needs to take that route. It needs to sit down all of its stakeholders and they need to decide a 10-year policy. That is step number one. So with every shift of government, every change of government, there is a change in economic policy and there's a change in the direction towards our relationship with countries. For example, if we look towards the government between 2013 and 18 when PMLN was ruling the country, you saw a big bias or big lean towards China. But that shifted as soon as Imran Khan came into power. And with CPEC, there were projects worth $93 billion of MOUs signed, and that only materialized into $30 billion of MOUs actually being on ground signed and actually being investment coming into Pakistan. So that $60 billion delta was there. Why? Because of that change of stance of the PTI government and discomfort of the Chinese investors to actually invest in Pakistan. And then Razak Daud one day just woke up and he started to look at all of those contracts of the CPEC which were signed and start digging deeper into them. That created a lot of discomfort between the investors. So we need to have one policy for foreign investors. I think the SIFC is a great window which has just been established, and the continuity of policy should be there. There should be one policy for all investors and they should have that comfort zone. If you look at India, for example, why do you see the likes of Amazon coming into India? Why do you see the likes of Apple coming into India? You recently saw about $200 billion of outflow from the Chinese stock market, and that money is now coming into India. Why can't that money come into Pakistan? So there's semiconductor industry being established in India. There's there's talk about big AI coming into India. There's talk about all sorts of manufacturing industries. They're betting on it to become the next China. Why can't Pakistan be on that same journey? So we need to have that one window policy for our foreign investors, and there cannot be any mistreatment towards the foreign investors, because we need that FDI coming into the country. That's the only way you will see these big projects happening. You will see this privatization of PI, which you're talking about right now, steel mills, which you're talking about right now. All of these lost government making SOEs, they need to be privatized. So you need to give comfort to those foreign investors. Till how long will we rely on IMF towards all World Bank and towards other structured debt facilities? We need investment into Pakistan, and we need a one window framework for that to happen. So despite change of government, there should be no change in policy. And I'll reiterate back to my opinion that there should be a charter of economy signed where all stakeholders should sit down and they should decide a 10-year plan. And despite change of any government, there should be no change on the economic policies provided by the government. Step number 2 is that we need to make export-oriented policies. In Bangladesh, I'll give you an example. So in Bangladesh, I visited, and you saw that I was on my way traveling through the streets of Dhaka, and I saw that this truck was moving with textile goods, and there was police escorting the truck towards the port. And I asked my local friend that, what is this? Why is the police escorting the truck? And they said, this is how much the government supports the export industry. It's protecting its trade, and that's how you saw Bangladesh reach to about $50 billion in exports. So we need to make export-oriented policies. Agriculture is one sector that is still untapped. You saw rice exports touch $1.8 billion. That's a good sign, but that is still nothing compared to the potential of Pakistan. You still have a lot of this agriculture land being converted into real estate. That needs to stop. We need to start growing our staple crops over there, and we need to start making export-oriented policies for agriculture. I think that has a potential of $10 billion per annum, given the food shortages in the world. So that needs to be exploited. Number 2, technology. I think technology is a sector which is still struggling. The policies are still not being developed. And you see these freelancers, they still try to get their funds outside of Pakistan. Why? Because the government still, there's a big crackdown on foreign money coming into Pakistan, and there's no ease of doing business over here. So there needs to be ease of doing business. So all of these freelancers and all of they bring their money back into Pakistan. You see exports driving up. Thirdly, I think minerals is a sector where there's still untapped reserves such as coal, such as copper, gold, and there should be foreign investment being attracted over there. You see Saudi, recently there's deals being signed over there. More foreign investors need to come to Pakistan. So FDI needs to cross in Pakistan. It needs to cross that $5 billion benchmark in the next 2-3 years. Otherwise, you'll still see a struggling current account deficit. You'll still see those problems coming in. So export-oriented FDI, restriction on imports, but sustainably. So we need to control our consumption. When we talk about palm oil imports are roughly $4 billion in Pakistan. That needs to be controlled. We need to step away from our addiction towards palm oil, look at local resources such as mustard oil, corn oil, other substitutes. So substitution of import-based products needs to happen in Pakistan. It needs to happen fast. So I think these steps need to be taken to control your current account deficit and take us towards that surplus, so Pakistan can lead towards a sustainable growth.
When it comes to Zarya, you've focused mainly on a business-to-business model. Why haven't you focused on more of a public sector opportunities? We spoke about CPEC, Belt and Road Initiative. There's a lot of money in construction in the public sector. There's also a lot of individual real estate projects, smaller projects that are going on. Why did you choose to focus on more of a business-to-business venture?
Right. So with business, we initially Zarya started as a B2C model, but looking at the challenges in the B2C sector in Pakistan with consumers, there's a lack of trust. Also, they're not recurring consumers. So, for example, if you're building a house, you're probably going to build it once in your lifetime, or let's say twice in your lifetime. So you're not a repeat customer for us. So then Zarya, so our average money spent on one consumer to acquire them, that was very high. And so when you talk about unit economics, that's where the unit economics was not on the positive side. So that's when we made the pivot towards a B2B play. With B2B, you have businesses. You mentioned housing societies. We have a lot of housing societies on board with us. You have a lot of construction projects which Zarya is undertaking. You have a lot of these retailers. So retailers, there are about 150,000 retailers in Pakistan, and they make up about 20% of Pakistan's GDP right now. So retail is a big segment, and that's one of our biggest target consumers which we plan to disrupt at the moment. We talk about government projects. With government projects, there's a lot of so government projects are eventually come down to these businesses which tender and they take up the government projects. So we are working with those businesses to help them streamline their supply chains.
At the moment, is there a current radius that you're focusing on? Is Zarya only operating in Punjab? Has it expanded to other parts of Pakistan, or do you plan to expand to other parts of Pakistan as well?
So Zarya initially started off from Lahore, and we just started off with having about 5 customers, which it took us about 2 months to acquire 5 customers. And today we're working with about more than 1,500 customers. They're located in 10 cities in Punjab. We plan to take this across Punjab and then eventually move towards KPK and then eventually bring it to other provinces as well. So we initially started off with Lahore from a very small scale, and Alhamdulillah, today we're expanding into all cities across Pakistan. And I think just a lot of, if you see the traffic on our platform, it's right now crossed 8 million impressions. So a lot of our review from our customers is that even if they don't buy from us, they start negotiating with their contractors. Let's suppose that if their contractor is selling cement to them for 1,200 rupees and on Zarya it's listed for 1,000 rupees, so they actually see that price discrimination is being done. So their actually feedback has been very positive. And even if they don't end up buying from us, they can still make those decisions, they can still negotiate, they know what the real actual prices of those commodities are. So we're making trade more transparent, we're making it more efficient. Then we're also planning to use artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques. So we've gathered 25 years data of these commodities, and we've managed to put together the price fluctuations on a daily basis, and we have the 25 years data for this. So we're now creating algorithms where you could actually create price forecast for these commodities, and eventually we plan to develop, inshallah, a futures marketplace for all of these commodities. So you could we could end up attracting a lot of foreign investment into Pakistani agri commodities as well, because there's a lot of demand for your rice. There's a lot of demand for Pakistani agri commodities in the regional markets. So when they can see the futures markets of these commodities, you could see more trade happening, you could see the size of the pie increasing, and you could see a lot of investment coming into Pakistan in the commodity space.